Happy Sunday, everybody. It's that time of the week again where we talk about the insane nuclear housing market right now. If you haven't seen, home prices have even gotten higher from a week ago. And even if you look in the chat here, my friend Amy Haslett has literally put in 7 offers and all of them have been rejected. So hopefully today she'll have a offer that's accepted. Today I have a very special guest. His name is Matt, and he's coming in from Texas. And I want to say his last name is Kellerman. I'm the worst with last names, the absolute worst. But he's been a longtime friend of mine. He's actually even had me on his podcast before talking about YouTube, but we're going to be talking about real estate. And be sure that if you have any questions about real estate, about purchasing a home, about selling your home, put them in the chat and just write the word question first and then the question, so it's easy for us to find your question, because the chat will run fast. So I don't want to miss anybody's question. So without further ado, let's go ahead and have Matt in here from the Texas area. Hey, Matt.
Hey, you had it right. It's Kelderman. It's an easy one.
Kelderman.
Yeah,
I want to say Kelderman and then a Kelderman.
My grandma years ago looked up what a Kelderman was, and apparently it was somebody who was the keeper of the wine cellar. And I used to be a bartender, so it worked out perfect for how my life played out.
My last name, he thinks, is Native American, which it's totally not. It's actually Irish. And you know what a longhorn cattle is? Well, there's also Smallhorn cattle, which is in Ireland. So my husband's last name is Irish, and they bred, his last name has to do with the type of cattle they bred, which were Smallhorn cattle.
It's so basic at the end of the day. It's just like your last name is literally what it says it is. It's just like, okay.
My maiden name was Mellinger, and that's German, and I have no idea what the meaning of that was. I have a very special guest today. My pimple is here to say hello too. So
nice,
just thought I'd point that out.
A 3-person show today.
Yes, it is. Occasionally, it has its own heartbeat at the moment. So
yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem. There's been a lot of headlines in the news. Eddie, if you would throw up one of the headlines that we were talking about today about the housing market. And I've been following them for the last week, and everybody's pretty much saying the same thing. It's not getting any better, and they're not predicting it to get any better anytime soon. A lot of people like to argue with me saying that there's going to be a housing crash at the end of this year, but I can honestly tell you that I don't believe there's going to be a housing crash by the end of this year. And what is your opinion, Mr. Matt?
I'm pretty much in your camp as well. This is just an inventory issue, right? And there's nothing indicating an influx of inventory. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but even if the foreclosure moratorium ends, it's not like all of a sudden those houses are going to flood the market the next day. That is going to be a months-long process to even get any of those homes to the market. And there's a million investors waiting on the sidelines with cash to snatch those up. So I just don't see how it changes in this calendar year at all.
Exactly. And then look, bidding wars, this is on Fox News, bidding wars heat up amid a red hot housing market. And even with the cash buyers, they're not just people with cash. It's also corporations. I don't know if you did you see the Wall Street Journal article that just came out? But I think it was almost 2 weeks ago now. But it was saying that corporations literally are buying whole entire neighborhoods and then selling each one of those houses to investors as individual rental properties. So the whole neighborhood is
unreal.
It's unbelievable. And And even before that, during the pandemic, places like Austin, Texas, were having. So we'll just say Tesla has a company. Of course, Tesla has this company, but then they make a little company, but they don't call it Tesla. They call it something else, like engineering properties. And then they are buying all the foreclosed properties, and they're always bidding about $1 more than everybody else. They always win the bid, and then they are turning those properties into rental properties, and then they're renting them out to their own employees.
That's unbelievable. And also a genius move by whoever's doing that, right? Like, that's incredibly intelligent. We're not Austin. Austin, as far as Texas wise, has certainly been the most aggressive market I think I've heard of. But we're seeing a lot of these, 40 offer situations, people going dramatically over list price, guaranteeing appraisals, and still losing, right?
Still losing.
Yeah, we're seeing all of that here as well.
The thing that is freaking me out more than anything is that people have this illusion of what happened in years past with the 2007, 8, 9 housing market where the housing prices crashed. But what's driving this market is cash. It's not kooky loans. That's the biggest difference. And that's what's not, as long as we continue to have this freeze on moratoriums of foreclosures, we're going to have a shortage of supply of houses on the market. More and more, I'm hoping more people will feel more confident to sell their home, but they're more afraid that they're not going to find a place to live. So they're like,
side of this, and I think that's why it's becoming increasingly difficult, especially if you're just a buyer heavy agent. I mean, this market is brutal, right? At least on the listing side, you get some of the advantages of what we're talking about, but it's hard to even have those conversations with some sellers because you really have to be able to articulate where we're going to be able to go with you, how leasebacks work, right? That's different state to state. So we're having to leverage a lot of stuff just to even convince sellers to go on the market in the first place. And then they immediately flip to the other side of the coin, right? After they sell and become buyers and start getting beat up by the market that they were just able to take advantage of. So it's hard to convince sellers without a serious need to sell to put their house on the market in some cases right now.
Some people may not know what a leaseback is. Can you explain that to them?
So it's essentially the ability for the seller. I would never, at least in Texas, recommend doing a buyer leaseback. They sound like they turn into disasters every time, but the seller can essentially stay in the home after closing, right? And so how we leverage those on the listing side is when you have 20, 30 offers, you're typically going to have a couple in there that have some flexibility on timing. And we're really trying to grab an extra 30, 45 days on the back end of some of these contracts to allow our sellers to close so they can go into their next offer or do their offer with no contingencies first off, right? And then give them the time that they're probably going to need to find a house because they're losing 3, 4, 5 times before they really get an opportunity to buy a house, right? Some buyers they kind of have to have their hand burned a little bit, I think, before they start making some of these absurd offers that are winning in some of the more popular neighborhoods.
I know sometimes it's hard to explain to people. There just isn't a deal to be had, and you're going to have to offer over. Yeah. And so when they lose a few, then they realize what the market is. Eddie, if you could throw up a question, I appreciate that.
Yeah, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer those too. Okay, what we got?
Hello, what's your opinion on in the first-time home buyer program Biden administration is proposing? There's 2 of them right now that there was proposed. One of them is the $15,000 for the first-time home buyer, and the second one is a $25,000 buyer program for first-generation families in the United States. So have you heard about these, and what is your opinion?
Look, I love buyer programs. I think they're amazing. I will say in a market like this, the appraisal guarantee is really what's king and what's winning. So I would also caution people to think that those buyer programs are going to be their savior and getting them into a house because cash is still king and those are probably going to play on the sidelines a little bit differently. But I've utilized buyer programs in the past for all kinds of buyers and they're an amazing loan product, right? The reality is the barrier to entry for most people getting a home is that down payment. They can make the monthly payments. They just can't put $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 together at any time. And those buyer assistance programs allow them to clear that first big hurdle, which then really starts kind of building their wealth. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's something absurd. Like the average renter's net worth is less than $3,000 and the average homeowner's net worth is over 180, I believe, right? Like just based on the home. So I do think those buyer programs are going to be great for a lot of people. They just probably won't fit super well in this market.
That's going to just say, but the problem is we don't have enough houses on the market. And if people are bidding cash over the amount, that $25,000 is like useless because they're never going to find a house and beat out those buyers with the cash. So, I mean, it's a great idea. I always like buyer programs too. I used them when we had the last crash. I mean, they had 2 different ones. They had like an $8,500 and I think it was another one was like $1,500 cash rebate or whatever. But the market was different. They had so much supply on the market. They were begging people to buy a house, and that was why it worked for first-time home buyers. I just don't necessarily think it's a good idea now. Now, I think it'd probably be a good idea for a seller incentive to sell their homes, especially if they're lower income type of housing, because we have a major shortage of lower income housing. Maybe that would entice a lot of sellers to sell their homes. And that way we could have a supply of those to be able to get people to build wealth.
I would like, if we're being really honest about like what I would like to see the government spending their money on, I would like to see the government spending money on incentivizing builders to build affordable homes, right? Like
Bingo.
That's really for me, one of the biggest difficulties, because even here in Texas, we still have or even DFW specifically, we still have tons of areas that can be developed they're just, honestly, it's not lucrative enough for the builders to go into some of those areas and do it. So they're going to worry about their bottom line, their product, right? And they're not going to go do it. Whereas if we could somehow incentivize builders, and I know there's different zoning things that counties and cities will sometimes do, but I know a guy who benefits from that, and he's probably one of the smartest humans I know. It's not easy to work all those programs together. So something that clearly benefited builders and incentivized them to go in and develop specific neighborhoods or specific areas could be way more beneficial, I think, than throwing 15 grand at people in this market specifically. Now with the lumber and window shortage and all that stuff's a totally different story, but
Well, here's the thing. I was just going to say the thing is they have done this before. It's not a new idea. They can just follow the roadmap that they did after World War II to incentivize people to purchase small homes. And you could build those little homes, little cookie cutters all the way around. Follow that deal, follow that plan and make it happen. They can make that happen. It isn't that it's totally unheard of. So, Eddie, you want to throw up another question here? Do mortgage rates have changes that are seasonal? No.
No, I think I think they're affected by a lot of other financial factors that may have an ebb and flow to them, but I don't think they're affected by anything that has to do with the time of year.
No, the markets are what the Fed drives the market. They change them whenever they need to. Yeah. And I do think that they're going to bring the rates up again. They're going to have to, because they've remained so low for so long. But even when they ticked up a little bit there for a minute, I thought, at least maybe this will slow down the buying frenzy, which it actually made it worse because people were like, they're going to go.
Now they were going to jump in, right?
Yeah, they were freaking out. And it made it even worse. I was like, holy cow. The phone was like, it got to the point where I was like, I just can't answer this. I just can't.
Yeah. Right. It's been very interesting to kind of see. I'm working. I usually don't work any more than 10 buyers at a time. And in this market, I've cranked it down to about 6, just because honestly, the sheer volume of homes we're having to show, and this type of stuff that we're doing now, going out and looking for FSBOs and trying to find deals that are less traditional and stretching people's areas a little bit. It's been a little bit harder, I think, on the consumer side for people to get into homes regardless of the interest rates, especially now that they're starting to go up, because now it feels like there's even more people rushing to the properties we don't already have. Right. Mm-hmm. I will tell you right now, I'm only working with very well qualified buyers who have cash on hand, because I have found that I can't get anybody into a house right now without an appraisal guarantee in the DFW market. I'm not saying there aren't deals out there and aren't people doing it. It's just the deals are so few and far between. I just don't really know what's going to cause it to slow down at all.
What is the DFW market, for those who don't know?
So Dallas-Fort Worth, we're about less than a month worth of inventory right now. We saw a 14.4% increase MLS wide. We have one of the largest MLSs in the country. Across the board, not specific to any city. Like every single house that sold on the MLS across the board was up 14.5% February to March. And I haven't pulled this last month's numbers because honestly, they're getting so huge. It really doesn't even kind of matter from talking point standpoint.
Yeah, they go on the market really quick. And if people don't know what a FSBO is, I use that word, that's for sale by owners. So what we've been doing as real estate agents is we see a for sale by owner, we have the buyer, we'll call the seller and ask them if they would be willing to work with a real estate agent to help pay for the commissions, and then we bring in our buyers. So we're doing everything we can. Eddie, you got another question for us? Question: better to sell with all goods inside? With all goods inside, are you talking about like all the furnishings? I know for our area it wouldn't matter. Like you couldn't sell those things as added value to the house. The house is what it's worth. So all the extra stuff like couches and refrigerators and all those other things are just things that you're giving with the house. It doesn't increase the value of the home. Is that the case in your area too?
Very much the case here in Texas too. We have a piece of paper called a non-realty items addendum. It attaches to the contract where we can line item all of the non-realty items, couches, refrigerators, whatever they want to stay in the house, but it's not considered part of the appraisal. It doesn't go to the lender. It's contractually binding and you agree to pay a certain amount of money for those things. But it has nothing to do with the actual transaction itself.
Yeah, we have it as a line item on our contract. It's like right on the first page. It says these are the items that stay at no added value. These are the ones that need to be removed at no added value right at the beginning. But if it's a laundry list, then you're right. We had
They
another
just changed our
agenda.
contract to include also the software that comes with all these new smart home devices, the passwords, everything.
Oh.
Because we're getting into this new realm now where what's happening is buyers are coming into houses and they can't access the Nest thermostat because it's hooked up to some old Wi-Fi password. Our contracts now puts the onus on the seller. They have to hand over all those passwords prior to closing. All the
Oh, that's
software
smart.
intellectual property. Yeah, that just
Yeah.
rolled out at the beginning of this month.
I had an issue with that because they owned the software system, and then they had it connected to a company, and the company was like, well, they are not, like, it was like a whole nightmare mess. It took a while to get that straightened out after the closing. That's
some
smart.
of these houses you can't run without some of that stuff. I mean, if you have a Nest
Right.
thermostat, unless you can hook up to it, you can't do anything with it, right? I'm sure there's
Right.
an override somewhere, but either way, yeah. So that's now in our contract specifically for that stuff.
That's smart. That's a
Yeah.
very smart thing. Do we have any other questions? Okay, question. Do you see rent increasing? Wondering about selling my home. Do you see rent increasing?
Yeah, I don't see how they couldn't increase as home prices increase, right? We're already seeing it here locally from a lot of apartment complexes. Some of the more luxury, high-end, $2,000 to $3,000 apartment complexes have been able to go up quite large percentages since last year. We're seeing a decrease in people renting condos. I don't know if that has to do with COVID, people not wanting to do like the really close living and purchasing. We're seeing a lot of condos coming off the market. But yeah, I can't see how rents wouldn't increase right along with the sales prices.
I know that in our area, the rents have increased, but we had a home rentals shortage anyways. And we have very few apartment buildings, and the apartment buildings that are available are expensive. So it's just as expensive to rent an apartment as it would to rent a house. So most people are looking for those homes. So because of that, of course, then their rental rates increase because they have more demand for a house instead of an apartment. It's crazy to me. All right, we got another question. Has housing been commodified to the point of no return? Commodified? Are you meaning like increased?
Yeah, like I assume the question is just, has it gotten to a point where there's just no reason to buy because it's peaked? I mean, I don't see anything. I think it's going to go. That. I mean,
it's going to go higher.
Well, of course. I don't even think that's the inventory or just the foreseeable future. That is just the nature of real estate, right? Like you can talk about Dallas itself as a very post-World War II city. A lot of our construction boom happened in the 50s and 60s, especially on the residential side. And those homes were being sold for $30,000 in 1963 when they were being built, and they sell for $600,000-$700,000 now. So, I mean, sure, I'm sure they'll reach the point where everything caps out, and some of the increases we're seeing right now are going to take maybe some of the future appreciation. If you buy right now and overpay by $30,000 or $40,000, you're essentially saying, I'm sacrificing my first 18 to 24 months of appreciation on the house, right? Depending on what market you're buying in, those types. It's a moving target, but there's a few things happening. But either way, I think there's always room for the housing market to grow. I mean, there's always people who want to own homes.
There's always people that are trying to time the market, though, and I understand what their trepidation is right now, because when you see that house that you saw in 2019 that was 150,000 and now it's 275,000, you're like, what made that 275,000 now? Like, what? In their minds, they can't see how it could possibly sustain itself. One thing I do want to note, though, is that the difference between now also and before is when we had these crazy loans, there were all these people that had these crazy loans, these interest-only loans, those types of things. They do not exist now. And the second thing is we had an exorbitant amount of supply because home builders were building houses like crazy. I mean, neighborhoods were popping up like popcorn, and they had more reservations about building to excess since that happened. So in the meantime, when all of this is going on with COVID, a lot of builders said, we're just going to dial it back. We're not going to build as much. And then when they started building again, those prices of things like lumber, concrete, building materials went up exponentially. So usually when they start building a lot more homes, the home prices seem to kind of level out, but they can't at this point because of the cost of building materials. It's impossible for them to reduce that price and bring or drive down the price of homes to buy a brand new one because of the cost of building materials. So that's another reason why I will stand by the fact that the housing market is not going to crash this year.
There's some natural factors too at play that as we sit on the sidelines and look at the market waiting for it to fall apart. I actually had a buyer who last year didn't pull the trigger on a house. And when we started looking this year, he was like, man, I really regret not doing that. I didn't put my family in the best position. We lost a whole year's worth of equity and appreciation, all this other stuff. So we start looking in this market, and he starts getting the same reservations to the point where we actually kind of discontinued working with each other because I honestly just don't think he has the right mindset. But he's always looking for this deal. And I told him, I said, you have now cost yourself tens of thousands of dollars in potential equity in the house by just waiting for something to happen that just hasn't happened. And now as we're seeing 10, 12% increase month over month, these are the new real comps, right? That house that was listed for $365 but sold for $405. Yeah, that sucked for the person who paid $40,000 over list price. But that's now a $405 comp that the neighbor's going to list their house and get it a $410, $415 sales price. Those are the new real comps, and your new sales price is building your appreciation is building off your new sales price, right? So we also have to remember that even in a really competitive market like this, you're really just deferring that money down the road. It's real cash now, and it really stings, and you're going to set the new bar for the neighborhood, and then somebody else is going to sell, right?
Well,
it's happening here over the past 4 months. There's been really bonkers.
Another thing that another comparison to the previous housing market, a lot of the influx in home prices were due to house flippers. And that's not the same right now either. A lot of house flippers during the COVID thing said, you know what, we're not going to do this. The housing prices are going up too high. And there isn't that many people flipping homes right now and trying to, make bank on it. I don't see that in my area. I've talked to several people in Florida. That doesn't seem to be the case there. I don't know how it is there, but I do not see as many flippers trying to, break the bank and time the market.
It's real cash coming off the sidelines. I think that's what people need to realize. These houses are appraising for the proper value. This isn't the banks doing this, isn't the appraisers. These houses are appraising kind of right where listing agents are putting them. And then buyers are like, okay, I'm really willing to take this $40,000 out of this wherever I've got it and put it in play on this contract. And appraisers are making money where the mouth is. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, they fill the gap. I mean, if it doesn't appraise, the buyers are still willing to give the sellers more than what the appraisal came in at, which is crazy.
Sucks if you don't have cash. I understand how that sucks as a consumer, but it's not the same as the banks messing all this up, right? It's not.
Correct. They're putting in their own money. It's not against the banks. Exactly. All right, what do we got here? Question: do you think that the current administration's plans to raise the capital gains tax will have much impact on the market? Who would be impacted by that? Thank you.
It's going to affect investors, right? And I will not pretend to sit here and understand all of this at the highest level, right? I will make sure to understand it when it's a real thing. But right now, I will say that it appears to me that it's going to affect anybody who tries to turn a quick profit on a home, right?
Correct.
We might see investors going to more of a buy and hold opportunity instead of a fix and flip opportunity, depending on kind of what their business model is. I don't think it's going to, again, to answer the question, I don't think it's going to stop people from purchasing homes. I don't think it's going to have that kind of effect.
I don't think it's going to affect the type of buyers that I've been seeing and what I'm reading about, which is corporations, and they're buying them and holding them to rent them. They're trying to make them into income earning properties. So they're not looking to flip them. They're looking to hold them for a long time. A lot of there's so many people who are like, cash is trash. So you could, put it in a hard asset. So that's what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. So, all right. Question: should home be moved in ready when selling? Should a home be move in ready for selling? Right now, I mean, the right thing to do is to have it move in ready. Is it necessary at this specific time? No. I mean, it just really isn't. But you might not get as much as you thought.
Ready as too, right? Should you turn over a clean house? For sure. Are you having to go fix windows and touch up paint and fix fences right now as a seller? Nope. You know what I mean? You're probably even getting people to agree to some large mechanical stuff that you're like, look, I know the air conditioner's 20 years old. Don't care. You know what I mean? Sellers do have a little bit more leverage right now as far as what they're going to repair and what they're not going to repair.
Right. Well, if I write a contract now and it's, one of these situations that you're fighting with everybody, the only thing I do require, I'm really strongly suggest to the buyers is that we're going to do an inspection. We're not going to request anything to be done, but if the repairs equal X amount of dollars more, we're going to be able to walk away from it. So if this house needs $10,000 worth of repairs, you have the opportunity to walk away from it because you have this home inspection that says that there's 10,000. Because, a roof here is expensive. We have these really high pitched roofs. I mean, some of them could be $20,000, $30,000. And then you get the air conditioning units, and then you got, all this other stuff. So, I don't want to put that on the buyer, especially if they're now bidding over $20,000 and they're tapping out all their cash. I want them to at least have that one out. But there's some people that are just writing them and with waiving the inspections, waiving all of this. And to me, that is a liability to you as a real estate agent. That's a liability to you, to your buyers. I would never represent a buyer that way. But
it's interesting because I think you're just hitting on the real estate agent. This is also like all the people who are watching this that are not real estate agents. This is what, like, a high level real estate agent understands how to use the contract to the buyer's advantage, right? Because in the state of Texas, it's a very buyer friendly contract to begin with. And there are multiple outs for the buyer. So like, for instance, I wrote a contract before we got on about an hour ago where they're completely waiving their ability to terminate due to the inspection. They're still going to do an inspection. The house is only about 5 years old, so they feel pretty comfortable doing that. But they're going to waive they're going to have the inspection, but just for their own kind of jumping off point knowledge. But the buyer contract being so friendly, that also may not be the last opportunity for them to terminate the contract if something came up down the road as well. So understanding how the contract, where its PowerPoints are, we talked about this on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, understanding the PowerPoints of the contract is hugely important on your representation side for sure.
Oh, let's plug your podcast. It's mostly for real estate agents, but you can learn a lot from it. Tell them what your podcast is.
It's super raw. We just talk about stuff. It's called The Only Real Estate Podcast Worth Listening To, which we obviously know it's not. But it's a fun name, and we can turn it into all kinds of other stupid things. So we're on.
I've been on it.
YouTube. Kristina's been on it. She actually dropped more knowledge about YouTube than anybody on there. Like, my YouTube presence sucks, but it's not because you didn't give good advice. It's honestly because I just cannot find the time to take on another platform right now, and I'm kind of burdened with Facebook. So that's just where I'm chilling right now.
Yeah,
the real estate podcast we're listening to, and others as well.
Yep. All right. Let's throw up another question here. Enough about us. Yes. Question. Family closing on a farm in 12 days. Should we sell our house now and purchase an RV or something, since it will take time to build and don't want to miss out on the hard market? Well, this is a question for me.
That's a good one. I like that one though.
Okay. So, think about the initial, if you have an RV already, yeah, absolutely. Instead of paying rent, if you're going to do that, the lot rent in an RV park is going to be a lot cheaper than actually renting a house or an apartment. And not only that, you have the mobility to travel around until your house is built. I love that idea. I think it's a fantastic idea, instead of renting from somewhere else. But this is a great market. And if you have the RV, do it. And if you plan on keeping it,
an RV to do it, but because that probably won't work out the way you want it to, right? But I go ahead.
Oh, see if you can put that RV on the piece of property that you're building the house. I don't know how, if it is farmland, you might be able to just park your RV on that particular property while it's being built. And our area, you can do that for I think up to 90 days. You can park a mobile home, a tiny home, or an RV on the property while your home's being built. Live in that, but once it's finished, you have to remove it. So see if you can do that, and then you can save yourself even a lot on lot rent. It's going to really stink though. That's going to be a tiny place. I don't know how many kids you got.
Yeah. I think the general gist of the conversation is, if you can find a way to make a bunch of money and then you have an affordable place to go and then maybe buy or build, and then that ends up making you money in the long run, of course that's worth looking at. Absolutely.
Yeah, we rented, Eddie and I rented, when we were building this house, we rented a very, very small, tiny house. Like it made us miserable. We fought more than anything, but it saved us a lot of money because it was cheaper than our mortgage payment. So it wasn't really good on the marriage, but it worked out. Eddie, next question. What's the best site to find houses first? My realtor isn't sending us houses personally. I feel like I'm not seeing everything.
The MLS is the live feed, right? Your agent hitting you with those immediately into your inbox is obviously imperative. And I apologize on behalf of all realtors for poor communication on any realtors, but that we don't, nobody likes that, and that's annoying. I will say any of the third-party websites are all the same. Here's what you have to understand about third-party websites that make money off of selling leads to real estate agents, right? So all the ones you can think of are the ones I'm talking about. They have a vested interest in not updating information on the back end, meaning They
Bingo.
want to show you that it's available, but they have no interest in showing you when it's not available. And in a market like this, where a home comes on the market on Wednesday night and it's under contract by Sunday morning, you don't have the advantage of terrible information. So, Jasmine, unfortunately, you're battling two things. An agent who's probably not doing you the greatest service. So I would encourage you to reach out to that person and ask them to be a little bit more attentive. And secondarily, if you're looking at the third-party websites, you're going to be behind the eight ball just because of that. They're really not interested in showing you updated information, because then you won't click on the house and ask somebody for information, which they then sell your information to an agent who may or may not have a clue about that house at all. Chances are not, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say just be leery of those right now, and try to link up with an agent who's getting you directly on the MLS feed. That's going to be the best thing they can do for you.
I had this happen to me. A buyer called me up and they were like, how come you didn't show us this house? How come you didn't show us this house? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, and, it says blah, blah, blah. So I pull it up. I'm looking in the MLS and everything. And I'm like, this house was sold 3 months ago. And then I called the agent and I'm like, look, I'm having a hard time. She's like, I've asked Zillow to remove that from the listing. She goes, I sold that months ago. And she goes, I get so many calls. I don't even know what to do about it anymore. I'm like, this stinks. And I get it. It's their business model. They're trying to get as many leads to come in to sell to real estate agents, but it doesn't help you as a consumer. So just be wary when you do look at some of these bigger sites. They do keep those listings on their website, even though they've already been sold. Yeah. But it's just so you'll click on their website. Exactly. All right. What question we got next? Okay, question. How do I ask my agent about pocket listings?
Boy, there's not many of them right now. Most sellers are going to make a lot more money going on the market and making you fight over the house, very candidly. For sale by owners are essentially pocket listings. They don't have the advantage of tons of money for marketing or huge portals to put their house out. So you can kind of start there. That is a place your agent can start. I'd also say agents who are constantly looking for people who are looking to sell are going to be your best bet as well, right? Pocket listings are one of those things that we hear talked about on HGTV, and we act like they're this big thing. The reality is they're very hard to find. It's a very time-consuming process to know the sellers who are willing to sell but may not selling. It's usually the efforts of an agent who's pretty serious about their business. That's what you're looking for, right? But for sale by owners are pocket listings that anybody can find just sitting around.
Right. And a lot of people will it gives it a fancy name, but you just might have some people that are like, we're thinking about selling in 3 months. We're not really sure. And then you have a buyer that comes in and they're like, I really like this neighborhood and everything else. And you're like, I think I know somebody in this area. So it makes it sound like you, yes. Like you've had this in your pocket, but they were just thinking about selling their house. And then you could say, well, I have an offer for you. I know you were thinking about it, but here's this offer. I mean, this is the point that we're getting to, is that even if you're just thinking about it, you're on our list, and yes. We're calling you saying, we have an offer for you. I know you were just thinking about it, but we have an offer for you if you want.
That's very much the same thing here. So for me, I'm doing 2 extra things right now. I've always organized my database with those types of sellers by what city they're in, right? So if I ever have somebody, for instance, looking in Plano, which is a suburb of Dallas, I can go in and search my whole database by sellers who live in Plano who have at one point told me they might be interested in selling, right? And I can filter by some other stuff. Same thing with for sale by owners. As soon as you become a buyer in my world, I'm now setting you up on all the portals that have for sale by owners, and you're getting alerts when those come on the market, just like the MLS alerts, right? So that way, if you see anything that interests you, we're going to go take a look at it.
Right. Perfect. What do we got, Eddie? All right. Why not raise interest rates to slow down the overvaluing prices? Make it a requirement that companies can't buy and require it to individuals getting a lower rate versus corporations. I just talked about this on my video on Tuesday. There should be a rule in everybody's city, county, everything. It's up to you, us as people, to walk into some of these zoning and planning developments and require them to not allow corporations to buy out whole entire neighborhoods. We as citizens can do this, and we need to voice our opinion about this. We have to stop it. It's ridiculous. In some markets, they're driving up the prices up to 25%. 25% because they're buying out the whole stupid neighborhood. It happened right there in Texas, Conroe, Texas. D.R. Horton bought out the whole entire neighborhood, those D.R. Horton homes. And I don't blame D.R. Horton for taking it. I mean, it was easy for them. They didn't have to sell each one individually. It was done for them. I just don't think that any city should allow a corporation to buy a whole entire neighborhood and turn it into a rental neighborhood. I don't think that's right. And even in your own covenants, in your own HOA covenants, you can ask them to make an amendment that says you can only have, let's just say 15 to 25% of the homes in your neighborhood could be rental properties if it isn't already in your restrictions.
They essentially do that with condos, right? I mean, the FHA will only loan, they can obviously sell more of them, but if you want to stay FHA, there's already little systems like this in place for things.
Correct.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm also just kind of a realist, and the odds of the masses rising up and actually going to these meetings and doing anything about it is the part where I think the system breaks down, unfortunately. But you're dead on. This is something that we can absolutely affect change on in our own cities and counties. We just have to want to take the time to do it, right?
You just need one person to organize it. That's all you need. It's one person to organize it and get the word out, and then it can happen. I mean, you get some loud voices and enough of them, then people listen. So
absolutely, they do.
So be that loud voice. It does. Yes. What do they say? The squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Squeaky wheel gets the oil every time.
Yep. Does selling a house as is denote a negative connotation? Not in our area.
No, one, the contract just really states whether you're buying it as is or you're asking for repairs. I think really every home's being purchased as is the day you're writing the contract, unless you're asking for something specific. And then most contracts allow you to go back and renegotiate repairs. Some states even have forced repairs on certain things. So no, I don't think it denotes a negative connotation at all.
In our area, all contracts, all real estate homes are sold as is, unless they're brand new and then it has warranties. But the day of the contract, the day it's actually signed, when you're done and handed the keys, it's sold as is. But that doesn't mean that if they withheld information that was pertinent to the purchase of the house, that you can't sue them. So for instance, like they knew that there was leaks in the roof and everything else, and they withheld that information. You have a roofer come out there to replace the roof, and they say, we've been out here 6 times. We told them that they need a new roof. Matter of fact, here's the appraisal of the roof repair that we gave the original sellers, and they never disclosed that. You can sue them for that. But absolutely. even though you checked as is on the contract, so that
seller's disclosure is what we call it here in the state of Texas, and that is where most lawsuits tend to happen. That is where if a seller is going to mess up, it's almost always on that document and not disclosing something properly.
I don't know why people don't disclose. I'm an over discloser. I have actually I have a thing full of like all the things that you get with the appliances you get. I have every receipt for everything, even the spray the bug
manuals. Like somebody can't just go online and just get that now.
I give them. I walk in with
a baggies just full of stuff.
I do that. That's me.
I've seen it.
I walk in with the 3-ring binder and I give it all to them, because I'm not going to, as a real estate agent, I'm not going to be held responsible for anything. I'm going to make sure all my I's are dotted and T's are crossed. No way. Yep, all right. What else we got? What else we got? Okay. Question is an appraisal guarantee.
What is an appraisal guarantee? So I'll speak to Texas because I know this changes state to state. So we essentially have the ability, and there's an actual form that addresses it, that allows the buyer to fully waive or partially waive the appraisal. So that essentially means if you offer $365 for a house and you waive the appraisal completely, you're contractually bound to pay $365 for that house, right? Whether your lender whether it appraises through your lender or not. So if that house comes in at $345 on the bank side, the bank is going to make you come up with $20,000. Or you essentially have to terminate outside of the contract, which could cost you your earnest or good faith money, depending on what it's called in your area. We're doing partial appraisal waivers right now, which gives at least a bottom to it, right?
Correct.
Which at least protects your buyer a little bit. So we're guaranteeing, the one I wrote today, we went $16,000 over asking price, and we guaranteed 11 of it.
Right.
So as long as the house at least appraises for $450, my clients are paying what they offered, right?
Right.
And that's essentially what it is. You're guaranteeing that appraisal gap shortage to some dollar amount.
Right. It's a gap. You're going to fill in the gap, and you're going to guarantee that amount no matter what.
Kind of like when you and I were talking about people taking cash off the sidelines. This is where that cash is.
Correct.
Saying, I know this isn't going to appraise. I'll pay $40,000 more for it. I've got it. And then here it is. Right. Or whatever.
All right. Next one, Eddie. Let's see what we got. We got a lot of people quit. Are starter homes in demand? Absolutely. Matter of fact, they're the highest increasing in value in my area. They have gone up the most and the quickest. They are scooped up the fastest. Is that the same for you? I know that I've heard that in Florida and Utah, starter homes are
completely the same. Whatever that kind of starter home price point is in any area, every agent I've talked to just says it's, and to your point, I think the bigger thing is it's the area where the biggest percentage increases are being seen too.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. They've increased the most.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Eddie. Let's pull up the next one. Question: why is supply so low? Population hasn't changed much in the past 2 years, yet the supply of homes on the market is at record lows. There's a few reasons. I'm going to give you one reason. Matt can give you the next. One reason is the fact that we don't have as people didn't want to put their house on the market during COVID. There's a lot of people that were like, I was thinking about selling, but I'm not going to sell right now because I don't want a bunch of people. I don't know what germs they have. I don't want them walking through my house. I'll just forget it. I'll just wait. I'll wait to sell it. All right. What's another reason, Matt?
Well, it's weird because it's so circular. That caused the next reason, which essentially was lower interest rates, right? The interest rates lowered because of COVID, which brought more buyers to the market. So they started snatching up inventory, which then in turn took us back to our problem you and I were talking about earlier is now people see there's no inventory and they're like, well, I just don't want to list now. So this whole circular thing of COVID causing people not to want to list has now came back around. People are like, I would sell. I want to take advantage of this market. There's just nowhere to go because nobody else is listing.
I'll tell you another group of
listing day where we could just get everybody who wanted to sell just to agree to list their house on the same day. We would solve this problem in an afternoon.
I'll tell you another group of people that would normally, and I know this is true of Dallas and Texas and Houston too, that normally would be selling at this time are people that are with corporate relocations. We always have a huge influx of people that are always constantly moving because of Exxon and Shell and BP and all these other chemical companies, and they have stopped. They are not relocating companies anymore. Like they do not have relocate employees is like they were. So we have literally a year of people that would normally be turning around that we do not have. And that's causing a big problem, especially for agents that count on that.
The safety valve of the new construction being gone is also not helping. You could always take your person out to some new construction on the outskirts of town, right?
Correct.
Those don't even exist anymore.
Correct.
There's just nothing. I mean, there's some builders here in some places locally that, I mean, you can't even really get in to sit down with anybody to sign a contract for 6 months.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of sense does that make, right? Like, so it's just kind of now it's just a self-fulfilling circle that's just going around and around that.
It's the craziest market I've ever seen. This is my 14th year in real estate. All right. What's our next question here? All right. Question. Why is the interest rates not interest rates based on income higher for corporations to buy interest rates? So why are the interest rates for corporations not as high as it would be for the regular person?
So for me, and I might get shouted down in the comments about this because I'm, again, not a banker either, but the reality is I think the reason it's not that way is because interest rates are essentially the bank's risk tolerance for each individual person.
Correct.
Right? The corporations with a ton of money, they're not going to go belly up.
Correct.
You might, right? Like, so they can afford, because those corporations are bringing such large amounts of money, and these banks can now turn around and probably use to lend you on your home, right? They can give them lower interest rates because they're just doing it at such a higher level. And then, just you, regular Joe buyer, is obviously a little bit riskier than these huge corporations.
Yep. It's all about the risk.
Yep,
It's all about the risk. All right. What do we got here? I think Eddie probably walked away. Let's hear. No, he said, no, give me a second. I hear him in the background. Question. The controllers use housing as a form of modern slavery. Can you prove me wrong? Mortgage equals death, pledge in Latin. I will say that I do believe that there is a widening of a wealth spread throughout the United States. I believe there is a group of people that are becoming poorer and poorer every single day. And with that, there's a group of people that are becoming insanely, disgustingly rich. And in this side, the disgustingly rich side, doesn't give two flying flips about this side over here. That needs to change. The attitude of after World War II, rebuilding this country with affordable homes and getting people to build wealth through real estate was some of the best ways that baby boomers acquired wealth to this day. We need to have that same attitude right now. And we are getting to the point where it's going to cause more of a problem than ever before if we don't get this under control, in my opinion. What do you say, Matt?
Like we just talked about what the difference between like the average renter and the average homeowner is just wealth on paper is worth, right? Like that alone, your ability to never, I grew up relatively poor and was a renter for a very long time, even into getting my real estate license before I owned my first home. And that was well into my 30s. And it is money you will never, ever, ever see again, as opposed to being able to get in a house when you're 25 years old, right? For whatever the reasoning is, you couldn't get in the house. Just being able to make those decisions prove that you can build wealth through home ownership. And if that is never afforded to you, it automatically puts you behind on the wealth conversation, assuredly.
I have a solution. I've had this solution in my head, and it goes along to something you said earlier, which is more affordable housing. So there are tiny homes available, which you can build these little 600, 700 square foot, and they're actually built in factories. So all they would really have to do is create little subdivisions and put them on one right after another with a little, pad to have one car garage parking in the back. And you can put one right after another. They would have to have mortgages, in which they do not to this day, a 30-year mortgage for $65,000. If you had mortgages for $65,000 for a tiny home, you would get a ton of people buying these up and being able to get into the system of paying for mortgages and being able to create wealth. Because in turn and later on, they can sell that property, gain some value from that property because it will increase over time, and they could take that wealth and buy their next house. It would be a great stepping stone instead of wasting it on rent. That is the solution. And there's plenty of land. I know some investors will say single family dwelling is ridiculous and they shouldn't do that. They should build sky rises. Yeah, that's probably true of like New Jersey and New York and those kinds of places. Yeah. But you got Texas and Louisiana and all these other places that it's very, very possible. And they should allow for that to happen, especially if you have a good credit score. You just don't make a lot of money. Why don't you allow these people to buy a home and do it in a way that's under a federally secured loan? That's just my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. And even agreeing with the people in the chat on the side, like this is just people who make money are very reluctant to give that money up. In any scenario, right? So making laws that make it easier for people to buy more affordable houses that don't have higher top ends is always going to be an uphill battle. I love the tiny homes idea. I love it. It's one of the first things that drew me to your channel and all that other stuff. So,
well, but the thing is that people don't understand is that a lot of the tiny homes and some of the ones I've featured, they're modular homes. They're actually built to better specifications than a traditional built home. And it would be extremely easy, cost effective, quicker to put these in place than it would a regular house being built. You could just pour the concrete and then 2 days later have these coming in and one right after another. You could build 100 homes in less than 30 days. You know, like how easy would that be? But and that
also I don't drives the price down as well, right?
Well, it would drive the price down for builders and developers, so they could offer those at $65,000, so those people could go ahead and get a loan. It's all doable. You just got to get people on board to do it. And there's lots of people that love the idea, but once you give them all the ways they can do it, they're like, hold on, let me talk to the people. And then they never answer the phone again because it makes them money to sit there and talk about it instead of doing it, so they can keep raising money. It's sick. It's a sick thing. Okay. Question. Signing a contract to build a new home next week. 6-month build time, hopefully. Should we list our current home now or wait until the new home is almost complete?
Let's just work up your 6-month time frame. That puts us in October. I will say traditionally October ain't the best time to sell.
Right.
These, Q2, Q3 early on, right? As you're getting on towards August, people are typically settling down. The housing shortage is causing all of these ideas to be thrown up in the air though, right? So I'll admit in a traditional year, I would rather sell in the spring, early summer than in mid fall, going into the holidays. The problem for me with putting a house on the market at that time of year is just you run the real chance of, if you don't get an immediate contract, you're in Thanksgiving and Christmas and your buyer pool just goes down. We didn't have this inventory shortage last year.
Right.
So I don't know if that's what's going to happen this time or not.
I just feel like the inventory is going to increase as more people become vaccinated, and that, you know, we're like over 2 million people vaccinated throughout the United States. I think a lot of more people are going to be comfortable with putting their house on the market. It was Coldwell Banker that came out with a number of like 1 in 5 people are even thinking about putting their house on the market. If it was me, I wouldn't do it any later than July. That's me, because I get a nervous Nelly. I don't want to wait until the very last minute.
Well,
Another
you
thing,
need that money to close on a new house anyways, right? So even if you put it on in July, you still may not have that money until September, right? Which then you're cutting pretty close if you have an October close date on your new place.
Right. And you can always look at it this way. When you start seeing a bunch of houses in your neighborhood go up for sale and they're just sitting there and they're not going under contract, get your house out of there. Yes. That's what we did when we lived in Florida. All of a sudden we started seeing these houses up for sale and they weren't going under contract right away. And I said, we need to sell right now. And we did. Yep. Yep. We still lost money in comparison to at the height of the market, but we didn't lose our shirt like a lot of people did.
Yeah.
All right. Next question. What is the site MLS Feed?
Yes, I was just throwing abbreviations out there. So the multiple listing service is what we have access to as real estate agents. That's essentially the hub where all of the information goes out to Zillow and all those other places, right? Mm-hmm. That's real time. The second I hit live on a house, all the other real estate agents can see it. And so what I was referencing earlier was having a real estate agent have you hooked up directly to that multiple listing service via email. So the second a home that fits your criteria comes on the market, you immediately get alerted about that home. That is the fastest way to see the home. So it's not something you can access as the public, but any licensed real estate agent in your area should have access to that.
We have something called Client Connect, and that like literally the millisecond it goes on, it goes to the buyers. We're lucky that it's like their own created website, and it's just full of the listings that would be in their price range, so they don't get distracted by a bunch of other houses and advertising. So they just were able to pull it up. It's called Client Connect.
Something like that here.
Yeah,
they all behind the times.
Yeah, it's, you know, they all have their own little system, but your real estate agent should be able to set you up on that. If they don't know how to do that, I would suggest finding yourself another real estate agent that does, because that is a very simple thing to know how to do.
You're about to put the largest purchase in your hand if somebody doesn't know how to send an automated email.
And I hate when they say,
what you would be doing.
I don't like when they say, well, I'm just not computer savvy. I'm like, no, this has nothing to do with it. This has to do with being able to service your clients. And if you can't do it, you need to find it in another profession. All right, next question, Eddie. Question, how will it end? How will the end of the forbearance period affect the real estate market? Will there be a sell-off? The mortgage forbearance ends on June 31st, 2021. And let's just say, all of the people that are in forbearance right now, every single one of them decides, I'm no longer going to pay that mortgage. That's it. I can't do it. And they let it go to foreclosure. It takes an average of 428 days before it ever hits the market. So you're looking for another year and a half before you see a giant wave of foreclosures hitting the market. So what do you have to say?
That is 100% dead on. I also think we're eliminating the human factor, that there are going to be a lot of forbearances on the forbearances, meaning judges, courts are going to be very reluctant to throw anybody who has a real hardship or a death or something like that out of their home. So even as they start getting filed, and Kristina's talking about that 400 days, I think it's even going to be delayed more, because the people are just going to be hyper aware before they start tossing people out of their homes. I think you're going to see a lot of people get even a little more extension, because you're like, yeah, that situation is pretty nuts. Right.
That's the earliest. It starts the earliest days on until foreclosure is like 428 days. After that, it can go. I mean, there was a house that was just not right down the road here. It took 4 years before it actually hit the market because of all sorts of stuff. Because there's all sorts of things that can happen with a house. So let's just say the couple gets divorced during that time of forbearance, and then they have dividing assets, and then one of the couples files bankruptcy. That causes all sorts of nonsense, and it could take years before that foreclosed property actually hits the market. So we're not going to see it for a while.
I don't think so either.
Question. Would regulations on speculation help the housing market? We have that here in Scandinavia. You can't rent out for how long or how much you want as a landlord. Properties have to be occupied. We do not have a rental freeze of money
Would
here.
regulation and speculation help the U.S. market? I mean, look, I will tell you right now, I'm never a fan of just regulating for the sense of regulating, right? Do I think that there are things that can be done to make the playing field a little bit more level? Freaking absolutely. It's ridiculously skewed. But no, do I want the government to come in and just completely regulate how much a landlord can charge for a property and how much they can sell it for and what they can do with it? No. Because here's the thing is this whole COVID thing is actually starting to prove that real estate investment isn't an automatic check in your pocket every month. It became a real actual investment that you could lose money on. There are people out there with renters who are not having to pay rent, and sure, they'll be evicted, right? But whatever.
We have a house vacant right now.
Yeah, the mortgage will never be paid on, and that person who owned that asset is made lose it, right? So that's part of the gamble. Of course, we're probably not going to see too many worldwide pandemics anymore, but that's part of the gamble of it. I don't think the government.
We're not done with this one.
No, we're not even done with this one. I'm not
like there's a song that's on TikTok that says the pandemic isn't over just because you're over it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, I know, but I'm ready for it to be over with. I'm so ready for it. But yeah, but they're now they have rent control in some areas like New York City, but you have to have lived in that area for a long specific period of time if they're going to do rent control. They have some rent control for people that are elderly. It just isn't throughout the United States. You'd have to be in a big city for that.
We just take our individual states' rights too seriously here for that to ever. I mean, if you just want my honest to God answer about things that'll just never change, the United States is never going to back away from allowing the states to make these kinds of decisions, and you're not going to get all these things on the same page.
And I think that's the right thing to do because every state does.
In my American opinion, it is.
Well, because some of our states are as big as the countries in Europe. So, I mean, culturally, every state is going to be different. You're going to have to address it
from different states for different reasons, right? Like I will just tell you, I see a ton of people moving to Texas from California, right? Like then for the states to all of a sudden, it just wouldn't make any sense. It would be like a micro version of taking a 10-rated elementary school out of a neighborhood and allocating it to a totally different neighborhood. You'd essentially be robbing people of tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in value on their home just to change over that policy. I don't think something like that.
Well, a 10-rated school, the only reason it's a 10-rated school is because the houses were so expensive.
100%.
Yeah, so all right.
What drives school ratings.
I know exactly what it is. Does the starter home ever become the forever home? Maybe I'm frugal, I'm staying put. Yeah. Sure. Honestly, if we had stayed in Florida, I think we probably would have. I don't know when we would have moved out of that house. I loved that little house. The only reason we moved is I saw the prices were dropping and I wanted to move out of the state. There's nothing wrong with your starter home being your forever home. I know, like my grandparents only lived in one house. My aunt and uncle moved in their 80s. They lived in the same house. They bought it for $10,000 in Wyoming, and they didn't move until they were in their 80s. So, I mean, yeah, of course.
My ex-father-in-law bought a house when he was 20 years old, and he still lives in the same house, right? So,
yeah.
I think this is more of a personality thing, because for me, I move every 2 or 3 years, and that's not normal, but I think that's just more kind of life. And then if you can make a boatload of money on the house, sometimes you just have to look at it and be like, look, I love it here, but I also can pocket a ton of cash, so we're going somewhere else. Right.
I have a 10-year window. I always have like this 10-year window that I'm like, I need to get out of this house. I need to go. All right, next question. What about eviction moratorium? Is that a big factor? We touched a little bit on that. So some savvy landlords have had some tenants that they needed to evict. So you can't evict them because they have been paying their rent, but you can evict them if they're being destructive or they're causing a lot of problems. I just was talking to somebody about this today. So if you're a landlord and you have a person, they're like not paying rent and they're destroying your property and they're causing noise complaints and they have the police there all the time, you can evict them. I mean, just because there's because there's a moratorium on the rent, that doesn't mean that they get to be an idiot. So there's a lot of people that are able to remove bad tenants, but we have a house that's empty and we just took that time to remodel it and remodel it and increase the rent. So
yeah. Yeah, I think it's just like anything. All of this eviction moratorium and stuff. I think most people are doing the right thing. They're paying when they can. The people who are, literally ran into one person who probably didn't need to take the forbearance, and they did, and it kind of bit them in the foot, right? But I think for the most part, people are doing the best they can. The eviction part of it, from a renter standpoint, I don't think is going to change the housing market too much, because honestly, if you just came off getting evicted from not being able to pay your bills, you're probably not purchasing a house anyways. Right. So I don't think it's going to affect the housing market too much, but I do think from the eviction moratorium thing, we're going to start seeing that happening soon as well.
There was an article out, I can't remember what magazine or what website I read it from, but they said that it could cause a problem for the mom and pop landlord, that if they have a bunch of people that haven't been paying and they can't afford to pay their mortgage, they're going to be putting these houses on the market and in hopes that maybe they'll be able to recoup some of that money and not have a big problem. I don't know how much of that's going to affect the amount of houses that are on the market. I don't see a lot of people having that issue, especially if they only have one or two homes. We'll see. Only time will tell. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball, but I don't see it as a big problem.
I agree.
Next question. What is your opinion about selling a house to Zillow, Open Door, etc.? Do they offer a fair price? Oh, Matt. Matt's like this. Go ahead, Matt.
So here's the deal. I'm going to preface all of this with saying I have a real estate license, and I'm not allowed to talk disparagingly about other brokerages. And both of these people that we're talking about are brokerages. Here's what I will tell you. There's something that is sent to you whenever you get an offer on your home from anyone that breaks down the costs, whether you get it from me or one of these other brokerages that you mentioned. You need to look very, very hard at that breakdown of costs prior to signing on the dotted line. Are there people that I think it makes sense for to sell directly to an iBuyer type of program, an investor buyer, right? Just give me cash, let me stay in the house for a little bit. Absolutely. I will also tell you, there are about 1,000 better options than the ones listed on the screen right now, right? There are plenty of ways for you to sell your house easy with no cash. Hang on one second. I love you, dude. My kid just yelled, "I love you" out the window at me. There are about 1 million different ways for you to sell your home directly to an investor, no hassle, as is, that are legitimate, that help you get out of whatever financial situation you're in, that will probably cost you less money than what we're talking about here. There's just no advantage to you selling to those two, right? I can tell you right now, they're going to ask for repairs that you wouldn't have to do in a normal situation. The current housing market, unless you have a need to sell immediately, just doesn't require you selling to them at all. And honestly, really any lowball investors. So I would say there are better options than those two, if that was the route to go.
In this market, it just doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
I mean, there's like this meme that goes around that real estate agents love to post, and it's literally like a dollhouse that's like off to the side and has like a broken thing, and it's like, this is for sale for $10,550 as is, so under contract in 20 minutes. People. It's really, you could sell anything right now, and all you have to do is put a sign out front. That doesn't. I don't want that to make it sound like it's devaluing the necessity of a real estate agent, because they will protect you when things get sticky, because things happen in every real estate contract you cannot count on. And if you don't have someone that has that expertise, that understands what can happen in contracts and how to protect you as a buyer or a seller, you're going to be in hot water, and you may lose money.
If you kind of want me to go off the deep end on the question, that's really your biggest issue, is your representation in those situations is terrible. Unless you are contract savvy or really understand and have sold a lot of houses, you selling directly to somebody with no representation on your side, it's kind of just foolish, honestly. There are too many things that you can be saved from that you wouldn't know were there, terms that are unnecessary, ways to protect yourself in the contract that you're just not going to have an advantage of when you go with companies like that, right? And I will also say, when you just start breaking down their fee structure, they very you go right now to both those websites, FAQs, on their website, and search, what do you charge me to sell my house? They'll tell you right there, and you will be shocked at the percentage.
Wow. Well, that's good to know. I didn't even know about that. You
You
learned me something new. Question. Just like in 2008, the housing market got overheated due to easy credit. Today, easy credit, low inventory is seen through the historically low interest rates. Will the crash repeat? The one thing you're wrong about. Well, the one thing you're wrong about, though, the credit isn't easy to get. You have to have high, like to this day, they keep raising the credit score to get those good rates. It's not as easy, and they're not doing those interest only loans or zero down loans. They're not doing that 100%. It isn't happening that way
It's
anymore.
real cash coming off of the sidelines. It's real
Correct.
cash. That is imperative from the consumer, and even real estate agents who are out there touting this nonsense of this is a mortgage crash that's about to happen. We have to be smarter about what's happening than that. As real estate agents, and then as consumers, just hear what we're saying, right? Like, this is not a mortgage issue. These homes are appraising for the proper value. It is real buyers taking cash off the sidelines. It is real money.
Well, and I will say I've done my fair share of housing crash videos, but this was because of the fact that they hadn't extended out mortgage forbearance programs. So I have done them. You'll see them on my channel, but it was because they hadn't extended out. Now that they have extended it out all the way till June 30th. And by the way, even if, let's just say somebody signed up on June 30th, they can still extend that out for another 6 months if they signed up on June 30th. So, I mean, we're extending that even further. The more the government got involved, the longer that it was a possibility for a crash. So that's why I don't even do those videos anymore, because it's clickbait. There's no reason. There's no crash.
No, it's a real thing. But I mean, we're using verbiage that's inaccurate. It's not going to be a housing crash. It's not going to be some catastrophic decline in the market. It's going to be a leveling off, right? Like at the beginning, right?
At the beginning.
And I do think this is market specific as well. I'm definitely speaking through a market that has always been very, very healthy and relatively low inventory all the time. So I have to admit that my perception on the national housing market is a little bit skewed. And I also think that what we're going to see more than anything is, even if there's a dip off in certain markets, it's not going to be this catastrophic fall. It's going to start with a leveling out, and then it's just going to taper back down to normal. I think there will be people who could sell their house for $500 right now that, when this is over, won't be able to sell it for $475, right? I think they'll miss the boat on some of these absurd people who are overpaying.
But I think the rural areas are going to get hit the hardest.
Definitely.
I think the rural areas are really going to be the ones that take the bath on this one. It
always sucks back in, right? We build out and expand out, and then as things kind of get relaxed and normal, they all come back to the epicenter, which for here would be Dallas, right? Everything sucks back into Dallas. So the stuff that's 45 miles away is less attractive when, I will say what communities are doing really well, and this is kind of a side note to that question, is they're building these communities where they have all the built-in stuff you want to do. They've got grocery stores, and they've got elementary schools, and they've got dry cleaners, and they've got all this stuff that ends up popping up around them almost immediately from an infrastructure standpoint, that now that we work from home and we've taken some of these drives out of our day for a lot of people, it becomes a lot more realistic to live maybe in an area that's not near something, because you've got all the stuff you need right there. And then you build your life and your family and your friends and all that there, That's
why I live in a rural area. I live outside Baton Rouge. I live outside Baton Rouge. It's a rural area, but it's grown exponentially since we've been here. Yeah. Well, Matt, I mean, you've been here for an hour. Do you want us to continue to take questions, or you got to go?
People are into this. I've got nobody pestering me, and there's a sweet breeze on the patio, so I'm fine with it.
All right, let's throw off another question then. I've heard that Christmas is the time to buy or build because there's not as much competition, and contractors need the business. Is this true? Typically it is. Yeah. Typically it is. Yeah. But this market has changed. In 2020, that wouldn't have been the case, and I'm not sure how 2020 would look.
I think one of the common misconceptions about the holidays, though, is we do assume that people are still going to list at a high rate, and we're going to be able to buy low. What happens typically is listings and buyers leave the market, right? Now, they don't leave them at the same rate, so it's not going to fall at the exact same time. But it's not like all of a sudden there's just this immediate offset. I will say where buyers can really make hay during the holidays is finding those houses that came on the market, which I always think is just a silly idea, late summer, right? List like August 25th when kids are going back to school and everybody's life is just, traffic starts picking back up. Everything just starts to feel like it speeds up right around then. And then those people on the market all September, all of October, into November, they're sitting on the market 80, 90, 100 days as we're going into the holidays. I think as a buyer, if you can find something that makes sense for you there, that's where you have a real opportunity to take advantage of the market and maybe get a deal.
Traditionally, sellers are a little bit more negotiable. Yes. Sellers are a little bit. Pros and cons of buying for sale by owner.
I saw this one pop up on the side, and I was excited to answer this one. I would like to hear your thoughts on it too.
Okay, the pro right now is that you find a house. The con right now is if you're only going to work with the seller itself, like you're the buyer and you're going to go work with the seller. Neither of you have ever bought or sold a home before. There becomes a big liability between the two of you and some bad blood because there's no negotiation. There's no cushion between the conversations, and things can get kind of heated and out of order of the way it should be done. Now, you can't have a title company that you're working with that actually has to fill out the contract and everything, and you're just filling in lines. But are you really protected as a home buyer or a home seller? Probably not. There's probably ways that you could have written that contract that it protected you as that buyer better or protected you as a seller better. It's always good to work with somebody that has that kind of experience, that understands the contract. The contract is probably the biggest tool, the best weapon we have as real estate agents to protect you as a buyer and a seller. If you're just filling it out, you could be really putting yourself in jeopardy.
I agree 100% on that. I also think that there's just some natural pitfalls that you're going to run into, even figuring out the value of the contract, right? Like you don't really even understand exactly if what you're offering is proper. Very honestly, not even talking about commissions percentage specifically, but the real estate agents are worked into those numbers that you see that close on the MLS, right? There's typically commissions paid in there of some percentage. So if you're paying the exact same price and there's no real estate agents involved, in my mind, you're kind of technically overpaying for the house, right? And Kristina's thing is really the biggest con is the fact that it's typically two people who don't understand the contract at a high enough level. And you just don't really know what you're doing and what outs you have and all of those types of things. I will not say a real estate agent is necessary for every single person. I believe there are people out there who are plenty capable of getting it done on their own, right? I see it
absolutely
frequently enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will also say I don't think there's a huge advantage to doing that in this market. One, most for sale by owners would pay a buyer's agent commission. So if you're on the buy side, there's a chance that you could still have representation anyways. And if you can do that and still get a for sale by owner, go that route all day long. But if for some reason the house that you love, they're like, hey, look, we'll work with you, but we're not going to work with any real estate agents. You need to really understand the contract at a high level.
Yeah, and there's like some cases I will say it's fine. Like if you're buying it from a family member and you've lived in that house and it was your family's house, yeah, there's no reason. Just go ahead and go take that contract to an attorney, go over it together and get it done. Another way you could do that is if you've been renting the house, you've been in this house for like 6 years and you've been a renter and you can work something out with the person that's selling the house. That's another case where you can work together. You know the house, you know the ins and outs of the house, you know what's wrong with the house. And, you just want to make sure that you get a good indication of how that house, what the worth of that house is. And then
that's the biggest thing is just from a value perspective. If you have a loan involved, the bank's going to tell you, right? Like the bank's going to get the appraisal. This really, the not knowing the value part is really only in a free fall if you're paying cash. And I've got to imagine if you've got a couple $100,000 in cash or even $60,000 in cash, you're pretty savvy because that's not an easy amount of money to stash away, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right. One more question. Do you both have a coming soon status in your markets? It's been another option for buyers to jump on the coming soons, as well as putting the backup offers on homes under contract. We do not have a coming soon. We did.
You are allowed to market coming soons to your office only prior to it going on the market. Once you start marketing it publicly, Facebook, email, anything, it has to be on the market within 24 hours.
Yep.
So yes, there's a small window for coming soon status. I will also say that as the fiduciary for my sellers, whose sole job is to represent them at the highest level and get them the best deal possible, selling most homes off market don't make any sense right now for my seller as a fiduciary. The backup contract, I will say, I think that's a pro move all day long. In the state of Texas, it's really easy to get in a backup position. And I think that accomplishes two things. One, it almost gets you the seller to show their hand on what the winning contract was, because they're probably going to come back to you with the exact same terms for the backup. And two, in a traditional market, homes fall out of contract for all kinds of reasons, and we're still even seeing it now in some cases. So you might back into a house. Backup contracts are relatively easy to do in Texas.
I just had one fall apart because they didn't verify the income. I've never been so mad at a lender in my life. Who doesn't verify the income until 3 days prior to closing?
This was
Like,
happening to me a lot last year, and fortunately, it's not anymore. I lost 3
couldn't
deals in
believe it.
2020 just due to lenders totally dropping the ball. I mean, like, just nothing I could have done to save it.
And then he thinks I'm an idiot and like tries to like mansplain to me about verifying income. I'm like, look, buddy, this isn't my first rodeo, and I know you'd. And then I tried to
3
get him to
days
get
is way too late. 3 days is,
then
there's
I
no
tried to
excuse.
get him to send the package to another lender to get the deal done, and he wouldn't do it. So I know he messed up. I know he messed up. So anyways, that was some real estate gossip right there. If you buy land, then clear the land. Can you use the wood from that land as lumber to build? I know there are freelance sawmill operators and wood that needs to dry in Central Florida. The bunny foo-foo, she's here every week, or it might be a he. Anyways, yes, you can do that, but you have to make sure that is okay with your local county. If you're allowed to do that, you're going to have to make sure that that lumber is suitable for building, and just dot all your I's and cross all your T's to make sure that you can do that. But yes, they do that for people that are building off the grid homes. That's what I'm actually making a video about that right now. And a lot of people use that lumber that's on the property to build all sorts of things of like fencing and everything else. And they do, like she said, or he said, they dry out the lumber and they will use it to build their home or an out shed or whatever. So
I
yes,
accept that answer because I'm a city realtor. I don't have any clue.
Well, Matt, I want to say thank you. If people want to get a hold of you, can you tell them exactly where they can find you?
Yes, I will tell you, look, if you want to engage with me on the highest level, you could slide on over to Facebook. My name is right there. I take all comers. I do have a YouTube channel. I will tell you won't see a lot of me on that. My business partner and I do have a YouTube page called Undoubtedly Dallas. So if you're here locally and just want to learn more about Dallas in general, you could go over and subscribe that and, just Google my name.
They're not YouTubers. You're gonna get better. You're gonna get better response if you go on Facebook. They are not YouTubers.
Really will. We're not YouTubers, like I said.
They're not.
We're on YouTube, and you're all here, but we do nothing on YouTube.
I harass Matt all the time about it. I'm like, what is
clips of crap we put on Facebook and we throw it on YouTube? It's
the worst. Terrible. It's terrible.
I closed 3 deals from YouTube last year, so I'll take it for the terrible amount of effort we put into it.
Yeah, and imagine what you could do if you put more effort into that.
Trust me, I know. I got to get some more leverage. I'm about to hire an assistant. So.
Everybody, I want you guys to give me a thumbs up and give Matt a thumbs up. And please tell him thank you for coming in and spending his day with us. Because his son was like, Dad, are you going to play Fortnite with me? He was saying that right before we got on air. So I want to thank him for spending over an hour with us answering questions about the housing market and how incredibly nuclear it is going to get. Is the prices have not stopped. They're going to get higher. They're going to get nuclear high. Everybody, thank you, Matt.
Me on. It was a blast. I always enjoy these high-level conversations, and the questions were awesome.
Will you come on again, Matt?
Heck yeah.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, people really liked you, so I appreciate you spending the day with us. Yeah. And if you're watching this on the replay, you can leave a question at the bottom for Matt and I will make Matt come back and start answering some of those questions. Like he's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so I will harass him to answer the questions. 100%. All right. So let's give Matt a round of applause and we'll say goodbye for the day. Bye, Matt. Thank you so much. Have a great Sunday. Eddie, you're going to end the stream for